Hello, everybody. This is Yogamonyo, and this is going to be a special video. I'm considering this my 600th subscriber special. This is a live commentary, so you have to excuse me for any sort of vocal hiccups. I'm also doing this pretty early in the morning. But I'm at 599 subscribers currently. But I figured, you know what, I'm still going to do this as my 600th sub special, as I technically did hit it. Now, as you can tell by the title, this is a Sonic the Hedgehog 1 retrospective review and commentary sort of video. And I probably shouldn't have started the first level. But I'll take it kind of slowly for the time being, just so I can kind of explain what this is and why I'm doing it. So, more or less, this is a little bit of a special video to me because I've always wanted to do sort of review-ish / retrospective-ish videos for quite some time. But I could never really get around to it, specifically for things like reviews and stuff like that, because while I could script things, I've never been one that's been too good to read off of a script. Everything kind of comes out sounding and feeling unnatural unless I'm putting on a very specific persona, and it's never really panned out correctly. I've always wanted to do a Sonic 1 video as my sort of introductory to that sort of style of video. But I could never really formulate a way to make it work as well as I wanted to. So that's why we're here today. Because this is more or less the way that I am used to kind of commentating and doing things. In a sort of live environment. It's just kind of a bit of a comfort zone, and I feel like I sound like a normal human being when I'm talking live, whether I'm alone or with someone. So the whole idea behind this is I've written a script in the past, and I could never really get something done. But here we are, and this is a bit of a playthrough, live playthrough, and commentary of how I feel about Sonic the Hedgehog 1. I do not have the script open on the side, the very old script, which had a lot of problems that I needed to fix up, but I never ended up doing it because I never really got to that point where I felt like I guess I needed to do it, because, like I said, it didn't really work out, wasn't really, I guess, my style. So if you like these kind of videos, by all means, tell me in the comments below, and I can keep doing videos like these because I can do stuff like this. Maybe I'll do one for Sonic 2, as I intended to do one for the entire series way back a few years back when I originally wrote my script for Sonic 1, which had a few revisions before I inevitably scrapped said project. But anyways, welcome. This is the first video game that I ever played, and this is a very important video game to me. But I still think it is fair if I look at this through a critical lens, and that is kind of the whole idea behind this this concept that I'm doing here. So let's just kind of jump into things, because we're in Green Hill Zone, and there's 3 acts, and I could blaze through this and not really get my point across on how I want to describe things. So another reason also why I didn't originally get this video done in the past was because somebody beat me to the punch on all of my ideas. I cannot remember the channel name off the top of my head, but they kind of took every single thought I had, like they just nailed it in the head with exactly how I felt. Not someone I know or am affiliated with personally, just someone who just so happened to kind of make the video around the time that I was originally going to do it. Anyways, this is Sonic the Hedgehog 1. This was released, I believe, in '92. I could be wrong, and I probably am, because my memory is horrible. And I'm not researching everything in advance, because I feel like it doesn't really need to be done for these kind of videos. The history and all that sort of stuff, while it is important to the game, for a video that's like this, I feel like it would take too long to start a video if I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty details of it. But this was a very important game in the 90s for starting, you know, the whole Nintendo versus Sega war and all that sort of stuff. That kind of happened, mostly, I believe, in the West more so than in the Eastern countries, but I could be wrong there. But either way, we are playing Sonic 1 here. Now, one thing I want to talk about, and this has always been a main point of contention whenever I'm looking at this game through a critical lens, and this will become more apparent as soon as we hit the second zone, because, you know, my thoughts and opinions start to really ramp home once we hit the second zone, which is Marble Zone. So Green Hill Zone is a very, very, very beautiful level. This is what I think to be one of the best introductory levels for a game. I think what they display here and showcase here is honestly perfect for the kind of game that they're trying to get across. This was essentially, as I'm aware, was supposed to be a game to rival something like Mario. And because of that, the way this level is constructed, it is very, very well made. There are multiple paths. It shows the speed of Sonic. It doesn't necessarily show, you know, the attitude that has been ingrained in how Sonic acts, but that was more of something in the later games that was established, that he is, you know, a hedgehog with attitude. But I love the fact that there are multiple paths everywhere. The zone itself is fast-paced. It has the iconic loops. It has everything when you think about Sonic the Hedgehog. Green Hill Zone has it, and Green Hill Zone is more or less the zone you are going to be thinking of when you do think of Sonic the Hedgehog. It displays his speed, his control is great. You can't just hold right to win, as said before in the past by some people. As soon as you hold right, there's an enemy that you immediately have to jump or roll into. You can sort of have a little runway at the beginning of the game, kind of to adjust to those controls right before hitting the first enemy. But it doesn't take too long to start hitting the first enemy and enemies in general as is. So it's not like you have a lot of room to tinker around with the controls, but there's a hill right at the beginning too, which shows, you know, hey, you can jump. And this is how high you can jump, because if I remember correctly, you can jump about as high as the hill itself lets you. Basically, it's like elevated just high enough so you can jump to show you this is your jump height. And then right after that, there's a spring in a tree that essentially is telling the player there are hidden things around. In this case, it's a spring, gives you more rings. It kind of just shows you, hey, if you're adventurous and you take the time to explore this kind of stuff, then, hey, you get rewarded. And it's just amazing. Green Hill Zone, to me, is probably one of the best designed introductory levels in a lot of games, I would say, actually. This isn't just exclusive to Sonic. I think any game, it's very, very well made. It shows exactly what kind of game it is. It shows you what it's trying to do, and I think it's just amazing. You go really high, it shows you the verticality that the game is going to hold. By taking you through upper path, it shows the multiple pathways too. And all that sort of culminates together to make this just perfect mishmash of multiple pathways, verticality, secrets. You can go left and right. You can find a whole bunch of different stuff, and this is generally speaking, this goes with every single Sonic game afterwards, but if you are somebody who is just better at the game, or you played the game good enough, the good players will get rewarded by usually staying on the upper path. The upper paths are usually deemed to be the easier paths in general to go through, but they can be kind of harder in terms of maybe platforming or just being adjusted to the level design, all that sort of stuff, the control, all of that. The player is usually rewarded for how well they can do, and if you stay on the upper path, usually you get the best goodies, sometimes the easiest way through a level, you don't have to deal with certain parts, and it's good. And we just did a boss, and I'll talk about the bosses a bit later because they all kind of mesh together. But now we reach Marble Zone. And now that I was talking about how amazing Green Hill Zone is, it shows you all these different paths, all these really cool secrets. It shows you just a ton of cool stuff in the first zone. The music is great, it's iconic, all that sort of stuff. Then we hit Marble Zone. And this is where I think Sonic 1 begins to falter. Now, this could be first game syndrome, as I like to call it. I don't know if that's necessarily the case when it comes to the development of this game, but I feel like Sonic 1 suffers a lot in retrospect from trying out too many different ideas on being a game, or rather, not on being a game. Sorry if things come off a little weird. Again, live commentary, so it can be a little weird and a bit harder to convey my thoughts as opposed to something that is obviously scripted, hence why I'm doing this sort of thing. But either way, I think they were trying to mishmash of ideas, like what do they think can work, or what should work, or whatever. There are secrets in this level, and like, don't get me wrong, like for example, this over here, nothing really tells you this exists, but it does, and it is a secret showing that if you still just explore around, you can find secrets in this game, even in these very slow levels. But anyways, this is a very inverse stage to Green Hill Zone, and to me that's always been a huge problem, because it just kind of takes the design of the first level, Green Hill, and it just flips it on its head for worse rather than better. It turns into a game or a stage that is very slow, extremely linear, there's no alternate paths, you have to stop in place. Suddenly, what the game originally was setting out to be a fast-paced game with multiple pathways to go, and all this cool stuff, multiple pathways, speed, basically the anti-Mario in a sense where, yeah, you can play Mario fast, and you can play this game fast too, but it's like, not with stages like this where you actually do have to sit and wait. It's a very inverse level compared to Green Hill Zone, and it doesn't make sense on why they did this to me. Like, why would they move from being... Why did the game change like this? And I think this game was kind of a bit of a game where they were testing waters and what does and doesn't work. Maybe they wanted to hear what fans liked, and then they would fix it up for the later games. I've always kind of assumed that's what happened, but obviously I don't know if that's what the case is, but that's what I've always assumed. Maybe that's why it was designed so bizarrely. Marble Zone completely ruins the identity, I believe, of the series. Kind of just turns into a very Mario-feeling level. And it's just not good. And this ends up being a bit of a pattern that happens with the entirety of Sonic 1, where all the stages are very, for lack of a better word, schizophrenic in how it's designed. It just constantly changes all over the place, usually for the worse rather than the better. And I'm actually glad I'm staying in the special stage for as long as I am, which I will talk about these soon too, but I just kind of want to get my point across because this is going to be the general idea behind how I feel, I guess you could say, about Sonic 1 as a whole. Overall, I think it's a great game, good game, I guess I should say. It definitely has aged, and a lot of it has to do with just how bizarre the levels were designed and how poorly paced it feels as a game. But yeah, it sucks that this is kind of what happens to the game, in a sense of it is a game that starts off so strong with essentially the perfect introduction, and then it just kind of throws it out the window to become a bit more traditional, to show this slower paced Sonic. It doesn't work, in my opinion, and I think it is the biggest downfall of Sonic the Hedgehog 1. It turns into a game that is going against what the first level more or less tries to teach you what kind of game it is. A fast game with multiple routes that can be played fast and slow, and there's with a lot of exploration and a lot of different ways you can handle the game and play it essentially how you want. And it's a shame, but this was also the first game at the time. So I feel like I can give it a bit of a pass in that regard, where they could have just been throwing different ideas at a dartboard, thinking what might stick. Maybe they'll see what fans wanted, and if they were going to make a sequel, if it did well, which it did, then they could hopefully fix upon those issues. And, well, they did. If I ever get around to doing Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 in the future, if you guys want me to do something again like this, then I will. I also might try the whole review idea again if you guys want to see me with a bit more of a cohesive structure to the video, but for now I'm just going to do it like this. And to kind of finish off the point though, for now, it is the biggest issue for Sonic 1, in my humble opinion. They should have stuck with the idea of Green Hill Zone and probably ran with it. And I feel like they might have wanted to, but they just couldn't. Because Marble Zone, and this is all I really have to say about Marble Zone, so I'm probably going to try to speed through the zone now, kind of as fast as I can. But I'll take this time to, in the meantime, before we move on to the next zone, because I feel like I need to explain zone by zone how things kind of feel. Because, like I said, I think this is like the inverse Green Hill Zone. This kind of goes against everything Green Hill Zone wants to show you and all that. So this is an inverse Green Hill Zone to me. But in the meantime, we can talk about bosses. Because if we're going to be talking about, say, Green Hill Zone, well, we'll talk about the first boss. The first boss is ridiculously easy. And that's sort of a staple throughout this entire game. All the bosses are very easy, especially once you learn how they work. But one thing that I always find to be very cool and fun is that the bosses are all, as he's called, Robotnik in the Western version of the game, known as Eggman later. He's always in some sort of vehicle of some sort that he concocted, and you're always fighting essentially Sonic's rival, his nemesis. And he's always doing it in a unique and cool way. And from a design and, I guess, I don't know if necessarily fun is the right word, but from the perspective of, design, I feel like it is good. I think it's cool. It's one of the coolest things in general, but the bosses themselves are weak. To be fair, this is a platformer game. I feel like bosses have always been a weak point. They kind of are just an extra, if anything. So I don't think that them being easy and bad is particularly detrimental to the game. But it is a thing. The bosses are all easy, and they're okay. They serve their job, and that's totally fine. Also, now that we're in Marble Zone Act 3, to sort of give, I guess, even more food for thought when it comes to the whole, it's very weird how they made this stage, the second stage, especially with the whole, the level is basically the inverse of Green Hill Zone in terms of design. For some reason, though, this act 3 of Green Hills, or of Marble Zone, they decided to, I guess, give you split paths, at least at the beginning. For the most part, it's still very linear. Obviously, you do need to get to the end, but you still do take a split path here. You can either take the left path, which is a quote-unquote hidden path, if you really want to call it that, or you can just keep going to the right, and you can do that, and it'll take you on another path. It doesn't fix the design, in my opinion, of Marble Zone. I think it still suffers very hard from the structure that it kind of shows, which is, hey, this is a linear level. You just go through it as is, and that's that. But felt like I should mention it, given that while Marble Zone is a very linear and straightforward level, it does kind of change itself on the third act, albeit briefly and barely. It is something to make note of. But now that we've talked about the topic of bosses and how I think stylistically, I guess you could say, it's really cool that you're just fighting these, even though it's the same exact person technically, it's your nemesis in the game, and, well, you're fighting different variations of his creations. I think that's cool. Especially because he is a scientist, and that's cool. Now, I do think... really interesting. Now, I don't really think the thought I was going to really matters. I think it was going to be a bit more redundant than anything. So, I guess I'll also take this time now, since we're still in Marble Zone, and it's going to take a little bit to get through some of these zones, especially this zone, which is very slow and plodding, and there's not really much to do. Except wait for your time to go, which is not fun, and definitely against the later philosophy of, or the philosophy rather of the later games and of Green Hill Zone. But the special stages. Now, the special stages are done very differently per game, and in this game, you need to get 50 rings and get to the end of either Act 1 or 2. There will be a big ring, if you have 50 rings, at the very, very end after you go past the goalpost. And doing so will bring you into the special stages. I think it's an okay way to get into special stages. The biggest downfall is you are restricted very, very heavily in terms of how many stages there are to how many different Chaos Emeralds, which are the rewards for special stages, you can get. And I think that's the biggest fault in terms of design when it comes to those special stages. And the fact that you have to hold on to 50 rings can be very daunting, too, because not everyone's going to be immediately, like, say, great as soon as you start up the game. So that could be daunting, and there's nothing that tells you inherently, except for probably the manual, that you can even do that, even get to a special stage. But if you don't know that in advance, and if you don't have a manual, well, you're kind of screwed. You're not going to know how to get to a special stage. You're going to get to the end of the game, and it'll say the end, or bad ending, or whatever it says, and it'll have Eggman, or Robotnik in this case, throwing the emeralds around, and there's 6 in this game. The amount of acts that you're able to get, I don't know offhand. The last zone, you can't get any special rings in, so you can't get the emeralds there, which just makes it even worse. But I think they wanted to encourage replayability in that regard, which is an admirable thing, but in my opinion, I feel like it doesn't really work well in execution. Mostly because this game seems to be all over the place, at least how I keep explaining it. It feels so all over the place. Sometimes I don't even want to come back to this game. This is probably the Sonic game I come back. In terms of classic Sonic, this might be the one I come back to the least to. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the level design is just all over the place. Now, to sort of cap off the special zones, they're very psychedelic, and they're annoying to control, to say the least. And I don't think they're really the greatest of special stages, but for the most part, I do think they serve their purpose well enough, kind of like the bosses. Maybe less so than the bosses, because they can take, as you saw, I took a long time on the third bonus round. And I just don't think it's handled nearly as well, and it could be very annoying. And again, you have limited chances, very limited chances, to get all 6 Chaos Emeralds, and unfortunately, you don't get anything but a slightly different ending for getting all 6 Chaos Emeralds, making the trek to get them feel kind of like a waste of time. It's unfortunate, but they do fix it later on, and again, I think I can chalk it up to it's the first game they made in the series, and they were probably still trying to figure out what they wanted to do. I think they served their job well enough, but it's still not that good in my opinion. Definitely one of the other low points of the Sonic 1 experience. But now we are in Springyard Zone, and here's where I can actually start giving some more praise back to the game. So in the first stage, we went through Green Hill Zone, or the first zone, we went through Green Hill Zone, and I said how I think it's the perfect introductory stage. It's very good, one of the perfect introductory stages in any sort of game. It does its job perfectly. It tells you and shows you what kind of game it is. And then Marble Zone kind of ruins that a little bit. It kind of falls flat on the face of the design in a sense, it feels like. I think Springyard Zone kind of brings it back. It's a little bit of both when it comes to having the slow bits of Marble Zone and having the much faster bits of Green Hill Zone. And I actually think this is a very good level because it does that. Not everything has to be as blazing fast as something like Green Hill Zone, though I think overall it's better design. I don't think that's how the game should exclusively be. I think Springyard Zone has a very good balance between the two, slow-paced and fast-paced action platforming of both the first 2 zones. The one thing that I will say, though, is it does have a lot of waiting still, and I do find that to be problematic. It's even more annoying debatably here because it is blocks that you have to constantly just wait for, and there's just not a lot of player input. You just go to a block, it's the up and down block section that you just wait for there to be an opening, you move on to the block, and then you wait. And you can actually get crushed if you're too close to the side, which is unfair to say the least, because you shouldn't be crushed, yet you can't get crushed. But I like that they also bring back the multiple paths. There's a lower path and an upper path usually for every single act in Springyard Zone. And I think that is great. It brings back the whole multi-path feeling very, very, very well. And I like that. I liked it a lot. And I think this also starts to show you the differences when you go down one path compared to the other. Usually the lower path being the slower and honestly usually the harder path to go through, while the top path is more for the rewarded players and you can get even more goodies, and it's generally easier and a bit more relaxing to go through, as opposed to the more deathly lower path, you could say. And all 3 acts do this, to my knowledge. There are some points where they kind of converge back onto each other, and that's totally fine. I think it does its job well enough. Again, I think the biggest downfall is just those block waiting sections. I don't really think it gets much worse beyond that. I know some people hate this zone, but I think in terms of pacing, this is how the game probably should have stayed. But unfortunately, that is not the case. You could argue that the game has good pacing, because technically this mixes both pacings of the first and second stage. And while I could say that is a valid argument, I don't agree, and most of that stems with the fact that Green Hill Zone is so fast-paced, so beautiful, so lush, and such a well-crafted zone that when you get to Marble Zone, it just doesn't feel right. Everything feels like it just doesn't click, in my opinion. And obviously, everyone can feel however they want. I'm just stating in sort of a retrospective sense. That's how I feel. It does not feel like the game should be playing this way. And especially when you get the later games under your belt, it's even more apparent that, like, just the sitting and waiting constantly is not really the style the series ended up going down, because it just didn't work very well. It didn't fit very well. And I'm glad that it stayed, or it changed, and ended up staying the way that it did. We can do another bonus stage. Another bad thing, too, I guess, about the bonus stages, too, is the fact that if you miss the ring, and if Sonic is on screen, he will just run away and you cannot get in the ring. That is also another big downside. Again, with already this limited time you have, or limited attempts you have to even get into these special stages, it just adds more to the frustration of when you can't get everything when you want to. And sometimes you just don't want to play through the game again because just some of the stages just aren't that enjoyable. And as you're going to see it in the zone after Spring Yard, it just gets worse. And then, of course, you can fail too, which doesn't make you feel much better, but hey, what can you do? One thing I will give this game good credit for, though, in terms of replayability, is the fact that it is a short game. So if you do want to replay, also, here goes the speed. Look at that. Look at Sonic go. But yes, you could easily just replay the game. It's very arcadey in nature. It even has an old, I guess you could say, arcadey style continue in life system where you will lose all of your... if you lose all your lives and your continues, you have to restart the game from scratch, kind of like Mario Bros. 1. But if you have your continues, you just restart the zone and your score resets and all that sort of stuff. The score doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, unless you're doing some sort of score attack with like friends or something. But overall, like, score doesn't matter at all. It's just kind of in the nature of arcadey-ish games, I feel like. And it can be a bit fun, though, if you're kind of comparing the scores you get from like when you first play as opposed to when you play it again. So there is that little fun factor you can have for yourself, because there's a lot of things you can do to increase your score, and that just might be the kind of thing that tickles your fancy. It's a very small and minute thing, but I think it works in favor of the game and its replayability, because this is a game that clearly wants you to replay it as much as you want, really, until you get tired. And I think it does the job well enough. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to go through the stages. For me personally, I don't mind, or I don't really care that much, and as I keep saying, it all has to do with the pacing of the game. See, now this is one of the downsides I will say about when you do a live commentary, is the points that I want to kind of talk about and get across, it's much more difficult for me to talk about the later aspects when I'm not there yet. So maybe if I keep doing these style of videos, I can slowly adapt and learn how to sort of talk about some other parts of games or some other aspects, or maybe I'll even cut certain aspects in full just so I can get my point across. But for now, we're just going to do the full game all the way through. It's a short arcadey game as is, so you know what? We're going to just do it live. So here's another one of these fun little bosses. Again, harmless, not a problem. Some of them can be really fun, actually. Like that one, like how little block, like, you know, how can you get Dr. Robotnik to get as little blocks as possible? Can you make him get one? Can you make him get none? Can you make him get all but one? How do you want to do it? I think if you do it the quote-unquote legitimate way, you can have 2 blocks remaining, or 3 or something like that. Because he takes 8 hits, I believe. Anyways, whew, alright, here we are. Labyrinth Zone. So, when I'm talking about games, or the game and its pace being all over the place, this is another prime example. So we went from a stage that was very fast, very fluid, very great, very tightly designed, and then we moved to a very slow, linear stage, not many side paths, none of that really going on for it. And then we move to a stage that has a bit of both going on, where it has some slow bits, but it also has a lot of fast bits. There's multiple paths and nice little secrets and goodies tucked away if you look. Most stages are like that anyways, with goodies being tucked away. I think overall the game as a whole does a fairly good job on making the goodies consistently being all over the place for you to collect if you're just keen to look around for stuff. But anyways, Labyrinth Zone. So now we've moved back to a stage which is easily the slowest in the entire game, though it is only that way because you are underwater. And even if it wasn't, I don't think it would help that much. I don't think it would make the design of the level that much more enjoyable. This level is such a, it is such a pace breaker to the last stage you did. And that's the same thing that I feel like Marble Zone does. I think it just does it even worse here, because this stage is just so slow. And it's not really designed very fun. Controlling Sonic in water is not the most enjoyable thing to do. And unfortunately, in this game, they don't really give you any sort of way to not deal with the water. Other games in the future will fix that issue, and they make it so, hey, if you're good enough, you can take like an upper path and you can just skip all this. But this game, no. And this is how I have to judge it. I have to judge it as the game that it is. And it sucks. One thing, though, that I will give this stage some credit for is the fact that, while for the most part it is very linear, it does actually feel like a labyrinth in the sense of there really are like a lot of different paths, it feels like. And even if there isn't really a lot of different paths or a lot of different alcoves or all that sort of stuff, it just feels kind of like everywhere you go, it feels kind of new, and then like you can play it again, you can do a slightly different path, and it just feels completely new and all that sort of stuff. And you know what? I think it does that well. This is the one thing that I think this stage does fairly well, but unfortunately everywhere else it kind of falters. There's some stop and go gameplay here, which isn't that bad at all if you ask me, but it's still just, this stage is just not that good. Overall, it is just slow. Everything is slow to a halt. You don't even get like any real slopes here. The only area I can think of, which we'll be seeing in, I believe it's the next act, is some water slides, and even then it's like, you get the water slides and the jet streams, right? And that is the only sort of speed you're gonna get, but it's it's so on rails, I guess, that it doesn't even count. And it's just not fun. So I think, and most people will probably agree, this is the weakest stage, easily. And I think a lot of it is just attributed to the fact that, again, like Green Hill Zone, or like a Marble Zone, it just kind of takes away everything that you've been taught the game to an extent. Marble Zone kind of ruined it, so it doesn't take away that part, but once you get back to the fun speed of something like a Spring Yard Zone, it does feel really sucky when you just start this zone and it's just like, oh gosh, we're back to this slow, unfun gameplay again. And well, that's really all I have to say about Labyrinth Zone. This place is a mess. I like the fact that every time I play this game, I feel like I can find something new, and then even though I kind of already know how the map works in my head, it's like I still feel like I can just play this stage. There's just so much stuff that feels new when I play it, which is, I have to give this level a lot of credit for that, because it does kind of evoke that labyrinthy feeling. But one thing that I think where it really shines, at least to me personally, is like, it doesn't really get boring in terms of look too. So I guess, you know what, I'll take that time to talk about the graphics. I think for the Genesis, this is a really good looking game. And I'll compliment, of course, the music too. The music is very nice, it's very memorable, very fun. It's just overall really good. Again, it feels very arcadey, but this is pretty clear that, the composers are having a good time and they know how to make some very fun and enjoyable tunes that everyone will remember for many, many, many years to come. There's also a little jump glitch you guys might be seeing every now and again. Don't really know how it works, but sometimes Sonic, when you're rubbing against a wall, will not do his spin jump. His trusty spin jump, which damages enemies and breaks monitors and all that sort of stuff. Luckily that gets fixed later on, but again, you gotta judge it how it is. It's a very annoying glitch in this game. It doesn't get patched out at all, so it is what it is. But the game graphically, I do think is really nice. It's very diverse with its locales. Like, you go from the sprawling Green Hill to the flaming Marble Zone to the nightly casino-esque Spring Yard Zone, which in the original version of the game, the prototype, was going to be like very much a casino stage, which ended up becoming a staple for the series later on. But then you get next year underground in a water labyrinth, and I think graphically speaking, it is a very, very beautiful game. And I'll never, never, ever fault this game for being like ugly or anything. I will never say it looks ugly, because I still think even to this game, or to this day, it looks beautiful. I enjoy looking at all these locales. The sprite work is very good. The animation somewhat feels lacking, but given the technology at the time, I feel like it's not really that bad. At the time, I still think it's fine, and I think it still looks fine to this very day. I feel like there could be, maybe it could be a little bit more animated at some points, but that's about it. I think it's totally fine as is, though. Like, I just think it's an overall one of the better looking games on the, I almost said the Dreamcast, on the Genesis or Master System. But, this game is also everywhere, too. Dear Lord. I'm playing it on the Sega Genesis Classics version on Steam currently. And funny enough, I'm playing it with an SNES controller. I don't have a Genesis controller converter, otherwise I would love to do that, or like a PC version. But I guess I can also talk about how the Genesis controller is, because this did come out for the Genesis. I do think it controls it controls fine on a Genesis controller, but the Genesis controller itself is more of the problem. This game controls fine. The physics are great. You see that from the very beginning. They clearly knew what they were doing with the physics and all that sort of stuff. But I do think the Genesis controller doesn't really help show the controls as well as they could, if that even makes any remote sense. Because the D-pad, for example, is all like one thing, kind of like a modern Xbox controller, in the sense of it has the D-pad and then it has these little parts on the outside, it's kind of like circular. It's almost like an analog in a way. Like, it's a circular D-pad, but it has the left, right, up, and down. At least my Genesis controller is like this. I don't know if this is how all of them work. And it's all just one big thing moving, and it just feels really awkward. Like, pressing down feels awkward when you're trying to get into a spin dash, or spin ball, I guess you could say. In this game formation, it just doesn't feel right. But the buttons feel great. All the buttons do the same thing. A, B, or I think it's A, B, and C buttons on the Genesis. They all make you jump. And there's nothing else to it. There's nothing else that needs to be to it. Now, see, when I was talking about me kind of knowing these levels fairly well, I remember this part of the stage, but I also remember this part of the stage being in the second act. So again, it kind of just throws me through a loop, and I just think it's really cool. Like, I thought this was in another act. Well, I guess it's not. None of the acts have anything, or different acts have anything really sticking out to make you be like, okay, this is Act 2 or this is Act 3. There's nothing very specific, like, that they stick with, like, okay, Act 1 has this gimmick, Act 2 has this gimmick, or whatever, Act 3 has this gimmick. The only difference is Act 3 has a boss at the end, if you count that. And it's fine. But though I will say, I do think the 3-act structure also is a bit of a detriment to this game, because it kind of exasperates the problems and it shows them up front. And like the problems that you have with the game, you might have with the game, where you're going to be stuck in that act 3 times. In the case of Labyrinth Zone, there's technically a 4th act relegated to the very last zone. They make it the 3rd act, but it's literally just Labyrinth Zone Act 4. So they make a zone that is already very plotting and boring and just not overall well designed or best designed for the style of Sonic. And it's just not good. I don't know why, of all the stages, they would make Labyrinth Zone be the one that has 4. But, again, I'm just going to chalk it up to they were kind of just tossing ideas out and seeing what stuck. Maybe they wanted to get the opinions of players, and they took those opinions to heart, because that's how I feel like it is. But now we're going to the next boss, which this is the only non-proper boss in this game with Dr. Eggman. You can technically beat him, but it doesn't matter. Like, you can destroy him if you hit him enough times. I've never done it. I don't even know if it's possible, like, realistically speaking, but it is a thing you can do. And this is just a platforming challenge. Essentially, you're just climbing this tower. It might as well not be a boss, and this is another place where I feel like Labyrinth Zone falters. They don't even give you a proper boss. It's just a climb that is a platforming challenge, and I honestly think it is worse that you're technically racing against time in terms of the water being raised. So you have to do this fast, but there is a lot of things here, as you can see, that want you dead, so it does not make it that much more fun. And then you beat him, and you hit the castle, save all the animals, which in the manual, that's what you're doing. He's Eggman's trying to take over, I believe this is Southern Island if I'm not mistaken, and he's just trying to convert everything into his own like robot empire. So what do? You gotta save all the animals. Alright, and now, if you want to talk about another inverse stage, here you go. Starlight Zone. One of my personal favorite zones in this entire series. Kind of. Actually, you put a little asterisk on that one. So, again, with the whole like inverse of Marble Zone to Green Hill Zone, this is an inverse of Labyrinth Zone, from Labyrinth Zone to Starlight Zone. So, Starlight Zone is easily the fastest stage in the game, and this is one of the stages. It's not like this, obviously, but when I think of really good Sonic stages, this is one that comes to mind because it's one that looks very beautiful, for one. The music is some of my favorite, probably my favorite theme in Sonic 1. But it is a very, very fast zone. If you know what you're doing, you can finish this zone faster than I think any other zone in the game. But it has so many alternate paths and so many different like locations, it feels like. It's just great. This is easily one of the best stages, I feel like, in the entire game. Apparently a lot of people talk about that, but I feel like I never see that discussion. I feel like this is a very overlooked zone. The enemies do suck. The bomb enemies in particular are pretty bad. And for the most part, to briefly touch on enemies as a whole in this game, they do their job as they should. I have no complaints. Yes, there are some annoying ones like these Orbinauts. You can't hit them properly, I don't believe, unless you're invincible. And they do kind of make you wait. But for the most part, there aren't many enemies that are problematic like that. But yeah, it does suck when they do exist. And that sucks, because I'm starting to wonder if I'll even be able to get all the emeralds in this playthrough. Keep getting hit by stuff, especially because the next act is very, very, very short. But it also has the bomb enemies, which are also very annoying. Invincible enemies. And one thing I will say that sucks about them is there's nothing that tells you that they are invincible. They're just kind of invincible, and you just have to accept that, and it just sucks. Because it's like, well, damn. What can I do? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. I think the end of the stage is here. I don't think I'm going to be able to get enough rings. Oh well. But yes, this stage is a complete inverse when it comes to Labyrinth Zone. Completely different. Instead of being the slowest, sluggish, most boring stage, this is easily the fastest. I think you can actually, I don't know if you can, but I think there's one section in this act where you can actually start out speeding the camera. I think, is it right here? No, it's not. Okay. But yeah, there's a section where you could, I think, where you can start out speeding the camera, and it's just like, the sense of speed you get is so good. And there's just so many paths and things you can do on this stage. It's great. I feel like they took the design of Green Hill Zone and they made it into a full-fledged proper, another proper zone. It almost feels like maybe they made this alongside Green Hill in a way. It feels like the paths are endless. They're not, but it feels like they're endless. It feels like I could go so many different ways and find all these cool secrets and do these things that I've never done before. And this is definitely a zone that shows that the lower paths are generally the scarier paths. Because if you go take the lower path, it's the bottomless pit path, essentially. Meanwhile, this path is at the top here. If you remain diligent and just be safe or fast, if you're good enough, it feels really good, and you stay safer. You're not in fear of bottomless pits. Overall, this is just a spectacular zone. and act. Unfortunately, it just ends way too fast. I'm going slow right now, especially because I do want to try to get the last Chaos Emerald if possible. Okay, because this is my last chance. And see how it's very problematic. I screwed up once, and I think maybe 2 acts I failed in, so that just shows you how little wiggle room you have. So if I screw up here, I can't get the Chaos Emerald again, and I will get the bad ending. I believe when I first recorded footage of this game, back when I was going to do my original scripted review, I actually did not get the true ending. I had my friend replay the game for me, Emerald Master Pix, who I'll give a shout out right here. He recorded the footage for me, and I still have it because I just never knew if I was. And there we go. I'm not getting the good ending, but yeah, I didn't know if I was going to get the true ending. And I was like, hey, could you record it for me? Go through the game real quick because it's a short game, and he did. But unfortunately, I didn't get that done, and well, we're not getting it done now too because there's no other way for me to get the Chaos Emeralds. And like I said before, I don't really feel like playing the game again. Like, it's a bit not satisfying to be like, oh, I didn't get the last Chaos Emerald. But I don't know if it's worth going through Marble Zone, Springyard Zone, not Springyard Zone, Marble Zone, Labyrinth Zone. Yes, this is a short game, but I don't know if it just doesn't feel really worth it to me. All those bombs explode. And that's, I think, my main problem with this game. But that also could just be a problem of me playing the game too much, where it's just like, I don't know if it's really worth it. I feel like for first-time players, it's fine enough where you might try a few times over. It's not much time taken out of your day. It's not like you're going to be like, oh no, I have to waste an hour, blah, 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 or whatever. Especially once you start getting the hang of things, it can feel nice. The only downside is those down points of the game, which are much slower, start to really trickle in, and then it just kind of feels not as fun. At least that's how I feel. And just like that, look at that. We are at the boss. So yes, this, like I said, this stage just goes by very fast. All 3 acts do. Act 1 is the longest act, if I'm not mistaken. And even then, it feels like too short. I remember having troubles against this boss. It's kind of like a physics boss in a way. But now I'm just destroying him. And that's Starlight Zone. Now, the difficulty also kind of goes all over the place in terms of this game, which leads to the pacing being very weird. I feel like Green Hill Zone is, for the most part, pretty damn easy. And then you get into Marble Zone. Not as easy, but it's still pretty easy. Then you get into Springyard Zone. Much harder, so the difficulty ramps up there. And then you get to Labyrinth Zone, and it's kind of the same difficulty as Springyard Zone. It can be harder. And then you get to Starlight Zone, and I would honestly say Starlight Zone is very easy. And then you get to Scrap Brain Zone, and this is one of the hardest zones in the entire series. I swear this stage is brutal. But this is supposed to be like Eggman's hideout. Though it also does show how short this game is, and I guess how much potential it did have. Because now we're in the last zone, as you can tell, it's like, huh, there's not really that many stages in this game, is there? There isn't, and I think that's where the 3 acts structure also dampens the experience a bit, because, well, you can't play more of the game, or there's not more to show off, when there could easily be more to show off. But, you know, unfortunately, that just ain't the case. So this is Scrap Brain Zone. So I would say this is a bit like Springyard Zone, where it goes back to having those fast sections and slower sections. I think overall for a final stage, this, I guess, encapsulates how the Sonic design should have went. Maybe outside of the, like, kind of ludicrous difficulty spike, because, well, this game for the most part isn't really that hard. This stage in particular feels like the difficulty just went through the roof. I know to be way more cautious, but it's like, when I first played through this, I remember immediately pressing right, and just dying, because there's those dropping pits, and it's just like, oh, okay. Also, there's a bottomless pit under me, so if I fail, then, you know, I'm dead there. And, oh, jeez, it's just brutal. This is a brutal stage, and it should be. But I wish the difficulty ramped up a bit more to make it feel more justifiable, as opposed to kind of being like, okay, you get these kind of hardish stages. You start with an easy one, then it gets a little harder. Then it gets a little bit harder. It's like about the same-ish hard, but it's still not that hard. And then suddenly this stage pops up, and it's like, oh my god, I can't keep my rings, there's bottomless pits and all this sort of stuff. And if you're going fast, well, good luck without any, like, prior experience. But for the final zone, I think it does its job amazingly outside of the strange difficulty spike. That is easily the, I guess, low point, you could say, of the stage, is that it is very difficult. There's not a lot of waiting, which is very nice. For the most part, you are actually doing stuff, like you're interacting with the stage. Like, there's the gimmick here is pretty cool too, with these spheres right here. But one thing I will also say too, that this stage is, I did say that there's nothing different between acts. I was technically wrong, because there is this stage. In this stage, all four, if you consider the final boss, they're all something different. So we were outside of the facility, you could say, a moment ago. And now we are inside the facility. And then the third act is just Labyrinth Zone again for some reason. But yeah, you can do that, and then the fourth zone is strictly dedicated to a boss, or the fourth act. But it's not, it's called Final Zone. I think it's just because they were sticking with a 3-act structure, but it more or less is just Act 4, and it's just a boss only. I will say, though, this section is stupid. I do not understand why they would put a conveyor belt with a crusher, because if you get crushed, I haven't shown it off of it, because I really haven't died. I think I died, like, what, once? If you get crushed, then, yeah, you die instantly. So it's not really fun when you're against a conveyor belt, but you have to go forward. You have to pass that crusher. It's bad. But luckily, I guess Act 2 is the only place that does that. Though I will say that is rather inexcusable in terms of level design. It doesn't feel very fair, because it feels like I'm fighting the controls just to survive, as opposed to, like, I'm fighting the stage, I guess, for lack of a better description. Oops, got hit. There we go, there's Act 2. Now we just have one more act left, and then the final zone, and then we are done. So this is how they basically say you're going back to Labyrinth Zone. Here's Dr. Eggman, or Robotnik as he's known in this game, and oh no, oh jeez. It is cool that they sort of show you him for a second and be like, hey, there he is. Then he kind of screws around with you. Now this trick that I'm doing here lets me skip the stage fast, and that is one thing I'll give this stage credit for, is it lets me go through it fast if I know what I'm doing. So I will say, again, with Labyrinth Zone and the whole, like, alternate pass thing or whatever, or not the whole, yeah, with the whole alternate pass thing, you know, because this is essentially a Labyrinth Zone Act 4, it sticks with that idea where it feels like the game, or the stage Labyrinth Zone, like, knows or like it feels like every path is different, or whatever that I was talking about when I was mentioning Labyrinth Zone, to give that stage any credit. This thing does the same thing, where like you can easily find out these like new paths and all that sort of stuff, and that's really cool. You can finish the stage essentially in under a minute. I can't because I keep getting hit by the stupid ball, but please. But the fact that you can still, very cool. Very, very cool. And oh, there goes the death. Yeah, but yeah, the fact that they stuck with that design is pretty cool. Does it put me back at the beginning? It does. Oh. I would show off the other path, but I don't want to. I want to get out of Labyrinth Zone, essentially. But there isn't much I can say about Scrap right now. Another level, though, that I will say, lower path. I think I mentioned this already, actually, but the lower path, yeah, is definitely, this is one of the stages where it shows you the lower path is not the path you want to stick to. You want to get used to trying to get good with staying on those upper paths, because they're generally just the safer paths, and you know what? It's good to be safe. And there we go, let's not screw up this time. There we go, I did it in 40 seconds. See, easy peasy. Now here we go. Final zone, the final boss. So we get no rings for the final boss, and there are... most Sonic games, at least the classic Sonic games, did that. And I think for this boss, it's totally fine. This boss is definitely easy enough where I feel like the 0 rings isn't really an issue. As opposed to some later bosses, that it could be a problem. Though I do think for a final boss, you probably should be putting at least some sort of form of taking an extra hit. At least like a secret somewhere or something like that. I just feel like it's more fair if you have another hit when taking on the final boss of a game. Especially because imagine if you're not particularly good at this boss, right? Well, then you could just game over here, and if you don't have any continues, well, your game is, 100% over, because game overs with no continues, or if you use up all your continues, well, there you go, takes back to the menu. You get back here in an hour if you're good enough, but that's the thing, if you're good enough. And if you're willing to play. Overall, though, I would say it feels like Sonic 1, for the most part, does stand the test of time. And a lot of that has to do with... There's a lot of factors. I think the history plays a big part when it comes to gaming history. I think, for the most part, most of the levels are pretty good. It's mostly 2 very big stinker acts or zones compared to 3 very good to just alright zones. And it's a very short game, it's very easily replayed, the music is good, the graphics are good. It's a name that'll never leave the minds of a lot of people, me included. And mostly just like arcade games, you could just come in and play this game any sort of time that you want to. I feel like even though there are games that have done it better, this is still a game you can come back to easily and enjoy yourself. While I do think it's aged, and I do think that the design of the levels are kind of all over the place, and the game doesn't have a real identity of how it wants to be played, like a slow platformer or a fast-paced platformer, or sort of in the middle. I think for the most part it does its job well enough, and it's fast, easy, and it's Sonic the Hedgehog, for crying out loud. Unfortunately, I did not get all the Chaos Emeralds, but hey, that's the point of this game. You didn't get them all. Why not spend another hour and try to go for it? Maybe you can see some new paths. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll find some secrets. Gotta go through a few zones you may not enjoy, maybe even a few acts. But hey, overall, I think you will enjoy the game. I think anybody who hasn't played the original Sonic the Hedgehog should. at some point kind of just experience it, if not for the sake of history when it comes to video gaming. It's absolutely a fine game that you can play. It doesn't feel like it's aged too terribly. It definitely has shown its age, and most of that has to do with the fact that just the later games of similar design have just expanded on everything better. But the physics are top-notch still. Most levels are fine in my opinion. And yeah, it's definitely something you should check. Just come in knowing that it might be a bit of a mixed bag. It's not the most amazing game in the world, but it definitely shows a lot of potential, and they capitalized on that potential. The sales for the game were obviously amazing. They packed it with the Genesis, and they made a second game, and did not as well, but it was the second best-selling Genesis game, if I'm not mistaken. But, you know, just what happens when you pack a game with a console. But this was kind of my little commentary and retrospective look. I think it's still a good game. It's just aged. And the other games do it better. Well, if you want to see more content like this, just leave a comment and I could give it a go. If you want to see me try a more structured review, I'll give it a go at some point. I'll try to rewrite a script and get something going. But thank you all for watching, for everyone who is stuck through. Sorry if I repeated myself too much or didn't really have too much input on certain aspects of the game. For these older games, it's very hard to kind of pinpoint an aspect and sit on, like, it's hard to keep pinpointing certain aspects and all that sort of thing. And hey, look, we're back at the title screen. So yeah, but if you enjoy this, by all means, tell me a way I could possibly improve on the way I commentate. If you want to see more of this, but you think I did things not particularly well, if you think I should write things down, you know, and maybe have a little bit of an idea of how I'm going to go into things, by all means tell me. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for subscribing. I know I technically don't have 600 subs at this point, but hey, let's be honest, if I did, I would probably lose one right after I got it, but who cares? Thank you for stopping by. I hope you all have a good rest of your day, night, whatever it may be. Stay safe, stay clean, have a good one. This is Yogi, and I'm out.